Welcome back from diff land. Now we're moving on to another command called Git Stash. We're talking about a concept called stashing, and that's really all the section is about, this one command and what it does and different ways of using it. I'm going to start in this intro by just telling you up front that some people don't really use Git Stash all that much, if at all. It's more of a convenience method, a tool that can help you in certain situations, but there aren't really situations where you have to use it. The first video, after this one at least, of the section focuses on situations where stashing would be helpful, the problem that it tries to help, or what it tries to make more convenient for you. So I just want to say that up front, this is just a topic that some people live their lives without using all the time, but it's good to know about. So I'm going to say that the basics of stashing is important. Using git stash save and git stash pop, those are two commands. They're both just git stash, but two things that have to do with stashing will be all important. And then the rest, I'm going to say, goes in nice to have, which might be a bit harsh on stashing. But I want to highlight that in a lot of the cases when people do use stash, which I recognize I haven't even explained yet, so it probably means nothing, but most of the time people use save and pop, and then these additional features are there, and I'm sure there are lots of people who use them all the time. But if you read around on Reddit and Stack Overflow, a lot of people just use save and pop if they use stash at all. So I don't mean to write it off before we get started. I personally use Git Stash frequently, but I just wanted to make it clear that not everybody uses it, and it's something you can get by without. It's just a convenience method. Okay, I'm going to shut up so that you can listen to me talk more in the next video. Okay, so we will soon learn what Git stashing is in this particular commands. In this video, I want to explain why it's a thing. What is the problem that Git stashing or Git stash solves? So imagine for just a moment here, we're working on a repository and I'm on the master branch. You can see up top on the right side, I've got a single file I'm working on, a Python file called cat.py. So I'm doing a whole bunch of work and then I make some commits and then I switch over to a new branch. I just make that new branch, I switch to it, it's called puppy, and I do some more work over here. And then I have some uncommitted work on this puppy branch. So I never committed this dog file, for example. And then I need to switch back to master. I don't know why. Something's wrong. I need to switch back quickly. What happens if I have a file or 100 files, if I have uncommitted changes on one branch and I switch to another branch? Well, there's really two options. One is that those changes will just come with me to the destination branch. They'll just come along and show up on the master branch in this case. The other option is that Git won't let me switch, and I actually showed this early on when I first introed branching. Git will give you a message if there's a conflict between files. It's not going to let you just switch to a new branch and bring that conflict over. So I'm going to show this in a very simple way. I'm going to try and illustrate it here with some HTML and some CSS in a new Git repo. But this is a problem, or it could be a problem. There are lots of times you might be working on something, but you're not done. You don't want to make an actual official commit, but you need to go somewhere else. You need to go to a different branch. A coworker asks for help. You realize that there's a really simple typo that you could fix in a different branch. You don't need to wait until you make a commit on your current branch because we can stash changes. So let me show you a situation where this would be useful. I am in a new folder. It's just called stashing. Just a little demo. It's not a repo at the moment. I am going to make it one. And I'm going to make an index.html file and an app.css file. So if you don't know CSS and HTML, it's totally fine. I'm just going to illustrate this here. I'm going to make a simple HTML file. I'll just call it hello. I'll have an H1 in here, a heading. Hello world. Again, the HTML is not the point of this video, and I'll add some lorem ipsum in a paragraph. And then I'm going to connect this app.css file. So I'll just do a link, app.css. Okay, so nothing crazy. I have an empty CSS file, and if I view my file in the browser, this is what it looks like right now. And let's just say that's all I want on the master branch. So I'm going to add and commit. Git add, git commit everything. Okay, create index.html and app.css. Okay, so this is done on the master branch. Now I create a new branch. So git switch, let's just do it -c. And I'm going to call this branch something like purple, for example. And I'll show you why in a moment. I'm going to work on making a purple version of this website where I add some changes into app.css that will make my website purple. So I'll do things like h1 should have a color of purple. I'll save, I refresh, and there it is. We have some purple there. Maybe I'll do the body has a purple background color. Background color should be, let's not do purple, let's do, is there like a light purpley color that I can just name? Okay, I chose lavender. Okay, I don't know if that's going to show up great on a screen recording, but you can see I've made some changes here. We have some purpley stuff. However, I'm not going to commit. For whatever reason, I need to go back to master for a moment. I've been called away, and I'm going to switch. So right now, if I type git status, we can see it says, oh, you have some changes in app.css. They're not staged for commits. There's no commits on this branch. If I switch right now to master, git switch master, no problem. I didn't get a warning or I didn't get an alert that says you can't do that. I'm on master right now, but I still see this purple web page. My changes came with me. So that was the first scenario here. If I make changes and they're not committed, they can come with me to the destination branch, assuming they don't conflict. And I don't have any conflicts here, right? This is basically if I was merging, it would be a fast forward. But anyway, nothing has been added or committed. And you'll see if I type git status, it still says, those changes are not staged for commit right now. Okay, so that's one option. If I go back to purple, git switch purple, I can add those changes and, git commit, make stuff purple. Okay, and then I'll go back to master, git switch master, and now those changes are gone. They didn't come with me because I committed them over on the purple branch, and then I switched over. They didn't come with me. Great. Okay, so next up, I'm going to show this second scenario, which is also common. If Git detects potential conflicts, it's not going to be happy with us. It won't let us switch branches if we haven't added and committed those changes. So I'm going to make a new branch here, git switch -c. I'm on master, and this new branch, let's see, maybe I'll change the name of our web page. I'm going to call it goodbye. All right, so goodbye world. I'll just do goodbye. It's easier to type. Alrighty, so I'm on this new branch, but before I do anything on the new branch, I'm going to go back to master, git switch master, and I'm going to change something on here. Instead of hello world, let's do hello world with a bunch of exclamation points, like that, and a bunch up here. Okay, so now I'm going to add and commit my changes on master, git add dot, git commit -m, update hello greeting. Now I'm going to switch back to our goodbye branch. So at the moment, this goodbye branch still has the older version, right? We don't have all these exclamation points. And if I update this to be goodbye world, and this says goodbye here, but I don't add and commit, I switch over to master from here. I have unstaged, uncommitted changes. I'm going to switch back to master. It won't let me. This is that second scenario. Your local changes to the following files would be overwritten by switching or by checkout. Index.html, please commit your changes or stash them before you switch branches. So this is a common scenario, or at least somewhat common, where I need to switch over. I need to go back to this master branch for whatever reason. Imagine it's a much more complicated project. I need to switch over to some branch. It doesn't have to be master. But I have work that is uncommitted on my current branch, and Git is not going to let me switch. Or I don't want the changes to come with me, like I didn't want those purple changes to come with me when I switched to master. So this is where Git Stash comes in. If I don't want to commit, I'm not ready to make a commit, it's unnecessary, I can use Git Stash to sort of pause, to save my changes without actually committing them. So that's what we're going to learn how to do in the next video. All right, so let's learn a bit more about how stashing actually works. We've talked about why, we've kind of motivated it. Let's see the commands. Fortunately for us, Git provides a command called Git Stash that helps us stash uncommitted changes, and it allows us to return to them later without having to clutter up our history with unnecessary commits, right? We generally, You can make a commit with stuff that you know is not quite complete or that you're not ready to commit. It's not the end of the world to have those extra commits, but a lot of the time you don't want to do that, right? Commits kind of are viewed as like the official history of your project. And if you're just screwing around, for example, or you're halfway done with a feature and you just need to quickly switch over, stash really can be helpful. So the command git stash, just git stash, at any point will take all uncommitted changes, basically anything staged or unstaged, and it's going to stash them. It kind of hides them away, but it remembers them. And it reverts those changes in our working copy. So we don't see those changes anymore, but they're still available in that stash that we can come back and retrieve them. So the command git stash is also, basically it's a short version of git stash save. It's just, this is I guess an alias for it. They do the same thing. They save your current uncommitted, your staged and unstaged changes so that you can come back to them. So it saves those changes, does not make a commit, and then we could switch branches just as a quick example. And then at any point, I can use git stash pop to remove the most recently stashed changes in the stash and reapply them to my working copy, wherever I may be. So I can also use git stash to stash some changes and then maybe a little while later, reapply them to a different branch or to the same branch that I stashed them on. So I'll show that. And I'm going to show a little workflow here, some diagrams. So let's say I'm on the bug fix branch. You can see I've got the working directory, some changes I've made. I've modified 2 files. I've staged 2 files, but I'm still not ready to make a commit for whatever reason. And then here's the actual repository with our commits. And I'm working on fixing a bug, but then, one of my coworkers, he needs help. He says, hey, can you take a look at what I merged into master, make sure I didn't screw up everything? Okay, so I need to quickly hop over to master, but I need to first stash my changes because I'm not ready to commit them. They conflict with what's on master. I don't want to take them with me. Whatever reason, I'm going to stash them. So what I do is run git stash. Git stash or git stash save will undo those changes. I don't lose them, but it reverts the changes in my working directory and it stashes them away. So I'm just visualizing, 4 files here. If I go back, we had 3 modified, 1 that I created in green. Same thing here. Both the staged and unstaged changes, they're all in the stash. So now I can hop over to the master branch. I can do whatever I need. I can even make new commits on the current branch. I can really do anything without having to worry about those changes coming with me. And then when I'm done, I can reapply those changes. So I can go back to my bug fix branch where I was, and then call git stash pop, which will take the changes that were in the stash, pop them off, and add them back into my working directory or in the staging area. And I can keep working exactly where I was before all of this happened. So I'm going to demonstrate this in the next video, but those 2 commands, git stash and git stash pop, go hand in hand. Git stash puts stuff in the stash. Git stash pop removes the most recent thing from the stash. All right, so let's try using the git stash command or git stash save in order to add our unstaged and staged changes to the stash. So back here, I've got our goodbye world that I've changed, right? Goodbye world and goodbye up in the title. And this is on the branch called goodbye. That's where I am right now. But I have not committed those changes. Let's also do one more thing, like maybe in my app CSS, I'm going to make the body have a background color that's really obvious. Background color of, magenta. And again, it doesn't really matter if you don't know CSS, but I've made a very obvious background color, magenta, and it says goodbye world up here, and the title is goodbye. So those are the changes I've made, and I need to switch to master right now for whatever reason, and I don't want to take these changes with me, not to mention the fact that they actually conflict. I can't take at least the index HTML change with me because, as we saw previously, it conflicts with what we have on the master branch. So I don't want to commit. I'm going to use git stash. So if I type git status, if I can actually type it correctly, you can see 2 files that have been modified. I'm going to call git stash save or just git stash, same thing. And it tells me saved working directory and index state. Index is just what Git calls the staging area. So it saved the staged and unstaged changes on this branch, but it did not commit them. So if I type git status now, we don't see anything, nothing to commit, working tree clean. And if I take a look at my files here, we're back to hello world. We don't have the magenta at all. And if I refresh the page, it's gone. So those changes are not here. And now I could switch to whatever branch I need to. Git switch master, which remember earlier it said I couldn't do because of conflicts. Now I'm on the master branch. We can see here's our hello world from before with all the exclamation points. And then I could go anywhere else. I could apply this changes here if I wanted, or I can go back to the branch I was on before. So git switch back to goodbye. And this is what we're dealing with on goodbye. And if I want to then get those changes back that I've stashed away, we use git stash pop. So this will take the most recently stashed changes. And yes, we can have multiple things in the stash. We'll get to that. But most frequently, most commonly in my experience, we just have one. I have one thing in the stash at a time. Anyway, so I'm going to reapply those changes to my working copy, which is right here. Git status, just to show you, it says nothing to commit. We don't see that magenta in here. We don't see goodbye world. And now git stash pop. And it tells me, okay, we added those changes back in for you. You modified this file, app.css, you modified index.html, and now if I take a look at my file, it says goodbye again. If I look at app.css, it has magenta in there. If I refresh my page, we see those changes now in the browser where I'm viewing the web page. Cool. So we successfully stashed some changes, and then we applied them. We popped them off. All right, so next up, I'll show you some more examples, and we'll talk about some other stash-related commands. Okay, so there is more to using git stash, and I'm going to show it to you throughout the rest of this section, but I'm going to be honest up front. At least in my experience, 90-something% of the time I use anything with the stash or with stashing, it's just git stash and git stash pop. So those are the two things I use the most: put something in the stash and pop it when I need it. However, we can also use something called apply, git stash apply, which will take whatever's in the stash and apply it in the same way that pop does, except with apply, the stash stays in the stash. Or in other words, the changes are still in the stash and we can apply them in multiple places. Versus with pop, our changes are removed from the stash after they're applied. So I'll demonstrate this. This could be useful if you wanted to have some stash changes that you need to apply in multiple places across different branches. I'm just going to come up with a pretty contrived example. I guess all of the examples so far have been. So we're on this goodbye branch. If I type git status, we have these changes, the goodbye changes, right? We can see that here, goodbye world. But I haven't added or committed them, so I could just stash them again, git stash. All right, now we type git status and everything's clean, working tree clean. And if I refresh the page, we see it says hello world now, right? It doesn't say goodbye. It doesn't say goodbye here. And we don't have that magenta background. Okay, so I have those changes stashed away and I can go to a different branch. Should we go to master, git switch master? Let's see, what are we working with here? Sure, so I'm on master now. And if I wanted to apply the changes that are in the stash, which makes the background magenta of the body, and it also changes this to say goodbye world and the title to say goodbye, I can do git stash pop. That would be one option. But if I also want to apply this somewhere else, I can do git stash apply. And we get a conflict. As you can see here, it says auto merging index HTML merge conflict in index. So now it's complaining to me, just like any other merge we've done. The difference is that here we applied something from the stash and that generated the conflict versus merging a specific branch. But it works the exact same way. I need to decide, well, which one of these do I want? Do I want hello or goodbye? So I'll keep the changes that are coming from the stash. So accept that incoming change, accept this incoming change. I'm going to save. In the CSS file, we have that magenta color, and now I refresh and we see goodbye world. Okay, great. And I could add and commit that if I wanted to. I could add both of those files, git commit. Let's just say, merge stashed changes, or let's say apply. So we have to make a commit because there was a conflict. But if I go back to the other branch, what was it called? I can't remember now. It's to git branch. Yes, goodbye. If I go back to goodbye, so git switch goodbye, our CSS file is empty, and we're back to hello, right? We didn't make a commit with that stuff. But I still have those changes stashed away because I didn't use pop. Git stash pop pops those changes off of the stash. They're gone and they're applied. But if I use git stash apply, it's still there. So I can apply it again. Git stash apply, and there we are. We now have those changes back in here. App CSS has magenta, and now we have goodbye and goodbye world. And I'll refresh the web page, and there it is. So I know it's not the most exciting thing ever, but that is using apply instead of pop. This can come in handy if you need to apply changes across multiple branches. Compare that to pop, git stash pop, which removes the changes from the stash. Apply keeps them in there, but also applies them. So far with git stash, we've put one thing in the stash and then popped it out, right? One set of changes, and then we popped or applied it. But we can actually stash again and again. We can have multiple stashes in our stack of stashes, and they will be kept in the order that we added them in. I've got to be honest though, I don't do this really, at least not frequently. Like I said, 99 or 90 something % of the time, I'm just doing git stash and git stash pop, but I'm being comprehensive, or at least attempting to. So I'll show this very quickly, well, relatively quickly. I'm going to make a new branch. So I am on this magenta, no, I'm on the goodbye branch. We'll just add those changes and commit now. Commit -m, let's just do change to goodbye. That's pretty much what we did. Okay, so now I'm gonna make a new branch from here. So git switch -c, and I'm gonna just call this branch rainbow. It's where I'm gonna demo some things. And then on this branch, I'm gonna start by getting rid of the background color in the body. Just have no background color. And again, if you don't know CSS, it's totally okay. But hopefully you can see when I wrote magenta, we had a magenta background. And I'm just gonna leave it at that for now. And I'm gonna commit that. So git add app.css, git commit, remove background color. Okay, so nothing in the stash right now, and we don't have any changes that we could put in there. But now I'm gonna make a single change. I'm going to give the body a background color of red. And I'm going to go in the order of a rainbow, or at least like the standard, Roy G. Biv, red, orange, yellow, green, blue, so on. So we've got red. Just refresh the page. There it is, red background. But I'm not going to commit this. I'm going to add it to the stash. So git stash. Okay. And now we're back to just an empty app.css. And if I refresh my page, we have a white background. Now I'm going to stash again, but this time I'm going to set the body to have a background color of orange. So that's what it looks like. I'm not going to add and commit. And Git tells me, hey, you modified that file. I'm just going to stash it right here, git stash. And there we are. We have another thing on the stash. The change is reverted in my working directory. We go back to white here. So I'll do it one more time. Body. Okay, so now background color yellow on the body. That's what it looks like. And once again, we have some unstaged changes. I'm going to stash them. Okay, so now we have 3 things in the stash. They're very simple, right? 3 sets of changes. And the first thing was just giving the background color of the body, or making it red. Then the second thing I stashed was orange, and the third was yellow. So they're stored in order. And we can view what we have in the stash, if needed, using git stash list. So if I head back over here, git stash list, there they are. We have, well, actually, we have 4 things in the stash, because when I used apply earlier, in the previous video, when I demonstrated how apply works, I never actually popped that set of changes off the stash. So we still have that here. But we have 3 that we just added. Now notice it gives us, it says work in progress on branch rainbow in our case, and then it gives us the most recent commit where we were working when we made that stash, remove background color. So this doesn't really help us in any way. But to be honest, it would be really weird to do what I just did, to make to stash 3 sets of changes on the same branch, one after another. You would probably just make those changes and stash them or work on a different branch, right? You wouldn't do what I just did, but I was just demonstrating it. So if I do git stash pop, for example, we will be popping this off and applying those changes. So maybe I don't want that. If I want red, which is this one here, this was the first one that we added from this branch, rainbow, I actually can reference particular stashes by using the little stash ID. So it looks like this, git stash, and then I can do apply, and then reference the particular stash at 2 inside of those curly braces. So I'll do stash at 2 right here. That should be our red background color. And if you're confused by this, honestly, I just say, let it go. It's okay. Just focus on git stash and git stash pop. But here we are, type git status. We don't have any background color here. But if I do git stash apply and then that stash at 2 in curly braces, okay, we now have modified app CSS, and there it is. It's red. Refresh the page, we see red. Now, if instead I applied a different stash, can go back, git stash list. If we look at this one here, stash 1, that's going to be the orange background color. And if I try to apply that one right now, git stash 1, we run into a conflict, right? There's a problem because it's set to red right now, and that is unstaged. So I either need to get rid of that change, which I could do. I could just delete the whole thing, type git status, and we're back to where we were before. And now I can apply this other stash, right? And it changes to orange. Okay. And really, that's enough of showing you this. The point is that we can have multiple things in the stash at once. In my experience, I pretty much rarely, I won't say never, but very rarely do that. I'm sure in some developers' workflows, it's a really important feature, but just for me, and I asked a couple of friends just to see if I was crazy, and according to them, I'm not that crazy. But in my experience, I just use git stash and git stash pop, put one thing in there and remove it. Anyway, we can view all those stashes that we have, git stash list. We can reference them if we want to apply a particular one using, I don't know what this is actually called. I call it a stash ID, but just, stash an index, a stash reference, and then we can apply any of them. And then lastly, I'll show you in the next video how to delete, clear, drop, whatever you want to call it, how to get rid of things in the stash if we want to clear it out. That's coming up. Okay, so the last thing I'll show you is how to drop stashes, how to remove them. And all we do is use git stash drop and then a stash identifier, index, whatever this is called. Now this is something you only need to do if you're not using pop, for example. Pop just removes it from the stash anyway. It removes the most recent thing in the stash and applies it. So if you aren't using pop and you're instead applying particular stashes, or you're using just apply to apply the most recent, you're not clearing out the stash at any point. So we can drop particular things, particular entries in the stash with this syntax. Okay, so back to our little website, a beautiful web page. I'm on the Rainbow branch, and I'm gonna undo this. Let's go ahead and just refresh there. Okay, git status, git stash list. And let's take this last one here and apply it. So this should give us that yellow background color. Git stash apply with that ID. And we're back to yellow. I refresh, we have yellow. Okay, so now I want to get rid of that stash. I don't need it stashed away anymore. So git stash list, there it is. So I can remove it with git stash drop and then paste that. And it says it dropped it. If we look at our stash list again, now we only have those 3 entries instead of 4. And then if we just want to completely empty out the stash, we have a different command, git stash clear. And this will just clear everything out of there. So I'll do that, git stash clear, git stash list, nothing in there. It's not showing me a single thing. Okay, so quick video on dropping and clearing the stash. And I guess I'll end on this note. I've said this a million times in this section, but it bears repeating. Personally, I use Git Stash and Git Stash Pop most of the time. I'm doing anything with Git Stash, so please don't freak out too much about, some of the other things we've seen. Working with multiple things in the stash and applying them and managing them, I just don't really do that, so I wouldn't stress about it. Okay, so that's the basics of stashing. All right, so it's time for a quick exercise that just tests your ability to work with the git stash command, and just in the most basic way. So we talked about quite a few different variants of git stash. This exercise is really just the basics. Can you put something in it and take something out? Okay, so the premise here is that you're keeping a diary, and you working in an office and your boss walks by, and you need to quickly stash some changes before your boss sees them. So as always, you can find the link to this document as a resource with this video. I recommend that you stop the video and try this on your own. Basically, you'll make a new repo, make a file called diary, and then inside of it, write a sentence that says, "I love my boss." Save, add, and commit, and that will be on the master branch. But then you make a new branch called the truth, and you work on that branch, you switch to it, and you erase the contents of the file, and you replace it with all of this, and you save the file, and just before you're able to add and commit, your boss walks towards you. You see them walking towards you, so you quickly switch over to the master branch. So that tells you switch to master without adding and committing. So we switch over, and oh no, the diary file still contains our truthful confession. Quickly stash the changes before your boss sees. So now the diary file should go back to just saying, "I love my boss." And the boss walks by, we add some more lies, just more lines that say, "I love my boss." Then we add and commit those changes on the master branch. Then our boss leaves, so we go back to the truth branch. We retrieve the changes from the stash, all of this, and then we add and commit on the truth branch, and we're done. Okay, very simple. So let's try it. I recommend you do it on your own as always, but here we go. I'll do it. So we'll make a new repo in some folder, ls. Let's make a folder called stash diary. We'll cd into that. Make sure we're not in a repo. I'll git init, and then I'm going to make the diary.txt file, and then I'll open that. Okay, so here's the file, and I'm just going to put "I love my boss," I think is what it was. Yeah, you don't have to get it exactly right. And then we're going to add and commit. So add that diary file, and then just a simple commit, add diary file. Okay, so then we create a new branch called the truth. We're going to switch over to that. So git switch -c the -truth. So I'm now on that branch, right? And I'm going to write the truth in this file. "I hate my boss." And then I'll duplicate that 4 times or so. It doesn't matter, as long as we have some number of some lines in there, some changes. And it's pretty obvious to see I have changed that. So "I hate my boss, I hate my boss, I hate my boss." Okay. Oh, and just as a quick quiz, what is the command I could run to see what I've changed since we made this branch, right? Since the last commit? Well, there's a couple, but I could just do git diff head, and there we are. We see that I removed this line and I added these lines in. Okay, so the next step. I'm about to add and commit, but oh no, my boss is walking towards us. Shoot, I gotta switch over to the master branch. Git switch back to master. Oh no, my changes came with me. This is a nightmare. My boss is about to see. Quickly stash the changes. So I can do git stash or git stash save. They're the same thing. It's just a shortcut. Now my boss walks by, and as they're walking by, I just continue to write some more lies. "I love my boss. I love my boss." I save. I'm even going to add and commit these changes. Git add diary, git commit -m, add more lies. All right, so I'm now ready to switch back over because my boss has left the room. I can go back to the truth branch, git switch the -truth, and we don't see my work, right? We don't see the "I hate my boss" ×5, of course, because it's in the stash. So how do I apply those changes? Well, I could do Git Stash Apply, but I'm just going to pop off the stash. As I talked about in the section, or the videos prior to this, I usually just use Git Stash and Git Stash Pop. So Git Stash Pop will then retrieve the changes, right, that I stashed away. And now I can keep working, or I can add and commit. I'll just add and commit, git commit -m, add the truth, and we're done. All right, so I can switch back to master, switch to the truth. It's not part of the exercise, but we just stashed something in the stash. Nothing crazy. I hope you're able to get through that, and I hope you don't actually hate your boss. Okay.